What's going on, everyone? For Forward Progress, I'm producer Jason here, filling in for the pizza man, Rob Pizzola, to bring you guys the definitive 2023 NFL team tier list. Now, before we get started here, don't worry, I'm not doing this alone. Today, we are going to be joined by the man himself, all the way from Dusseldorf, Germany. Hopefully I said that right. Fabian Sommer. Fabian, how's it going, my man?
Jason, so first of all, you pronounce Düsseldorf much better than Rob after probably like 30 tries. So kudos
Perfect.
to you. Yeah, great to be back after the draft. Ready to talk some football. We will bang out some team tiers, some initial team tiers. I mean, it's early May, and they are still subject to change. A lot of stuff can happen until September, but I think these early team tiers look pretty good, and we might have a few controversial ones that might lead to some interesting discussions.
I mean, that's why we do these tier lists here. I'm sure someone out there is going to disagree with any tier list that's put together ever. And now, if you're new
Yes.
here and you're not really familiar with how a tier list works, I just want to keep you guys informed on how we're kind of going to be doing things here. We're going to be ranking all 32 NFL teams. We're going to separate them into tiers. We're going to be looking at the teams that are playoff contenders. We're going to be looking at the teams that are just out in a completely different ballpark, some teams that are just completely down bad, and the teams that are in contention for the number one overall pick, regardless of whether they have a draft pick or not. A little bit of a foreshadowing there. But without further ado, let's bring this thing up. Let's bring the tier list maker up here, and let's start off with the top tier because
Yes.
I think everyone can kind of guess what's going on with the top tier. So Fabian, who do you got in the top tier here?
Yeah, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid are still a different ballpark, different animal for me. We saw it again last season. I think it's pretty justifiable to put them in their own tier until like anyone can come close to the elite level and the consistency level of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, for sure. When you have the best quarterback in the NFL, it kind of separates you from everyone else. But I think some might be surprised that that's actually it for this tier list. I think some might argue other teams might be close to being in this tier list, and hey, that's why we have the next tier, which is they're close. So we have 4 teams here in this tier list of they're close. I'm going to start off with one that you put down before. It's the Philadelphia Eagles. So tell me why the Eagles aren't yet in that different ballpark tier, but they're, I guess, I'd argue the best of the bunch here that they are close.
Yeah, I mean, the Eagles are very, very close to the Chiefs for me. What I like about the Eagles is that they are basically returning their full offense. They still have the best offensive line in the league. They have Jalen Hurts, who can grow another year, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, a great offensive scheme. And what drives success in the NFL, especially long term, is offense. Offense is very stable and predictive. Once you have a good quarterback and a good scheme and some playmakers, it's very hard to get off of the, let's say, upper third in terms of NFL offenses. And the Eagles are returning all their offense. Their defense might take a step back just in terms of variance, fewer turnovers. They lost some guys. They still have a very dominating defense, some playmakers in their secondary. I think overall they will be fine, and they should once again be competing for the first spot in the NFC, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I love what they did at the draft too, addressing a big need on the defensive line there. And who knows, maybe those guys can step up and fill in those holes that you mentioned. But we got 3 more teams in this tier list, and I'm going to kind of bucket these 2 teams together. It's going to be the Bengals and the Bills. Just, again, got perennial contenders the last couple of years. They've always been able to make it pretty far. They just play, again, in the toughest division with the Chiefs, so they haven't really been able to make it all the way to the Super Bowl other than the one year that the Bengals did. But, yeah, I guess, what do you think about these teams? I guess they're kind of in a bucket together. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people will disagree with that. 2 great quarterbacks, very stable, 2 good offenses. As long as Josh Allen and Joe Burrow keep playing at those levels with their playmakers like Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Stephon Diggs. I also like that the Bills went after a playmaker in Dalton Kincaid. Tight ends in their rookie season, always tough to project, might have a slow start, but I think the Bills and Bengals, for as long as they stay healthy, which applies to all teams, they should be good to go. Their offense should dictate, and they should be near the top of the AFC.
Yeah, and it's a great pickup for the Bills there, Dalton Kincaid. As a USC fan, I unfortunately had to watch Utah beat the crap out of USC with Dalton Kincaid. That guy's a stud, and they've been able. Dawson Knox has been able to produce for the Bills, so I'm sure Dalton Kincaid will be able to do so as well. And now the final team in this tier list, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked, but I think if you take the contract negotiations out of it, if this player was already signed with the team, I don't think it would be that shocking. And the team you have here is the Baltimore Ravens. So tell us a little bit more about the Baltimore Ravens and why you have them in the they are close tier.
Yes, I think that I am probably a little bit off market or off consensus with that. I think one of the biggest caveats to the Ravens offense in past years has been that they really lacked explosiveness and um, uh, they lacked explosiveness and a really creative passing game. They basically had Mark Andrews, and there was almost no one else. Rashad Bateman could have a breakout year, but he has been injured in the past couple of years. Now they got Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Zay Flowers, a lot of scouts like coming into the draft, and Odell Beckham. I mean, Beckham is 31 years old. I don't think we should expect like old day Odell Beckham, but he was pretty good for the Rams during their Super Bowl run. And in my opinion, what's the most fascinating combination for the Ravens is Lamar Jackson as a passer and Todd Monken with the OC. That's why I'm probably higher on Ravens than the market right now or than the consensus NFL media. I think we are going to see a different Ravens offense in the sense that they will be more pass heavy. And Todd Monken, wherever he has been, he really was able to orchestrate great passing offenses. He got the most out of Jameis Winston and Ryan Fitzpatrick at the Buccaneers. He was the architect of the Georgia offense the past 2 seasons, who did not have a quarterback who went high in the draft. So really expecting a completely different offense. I think Lamar Jackson as a passer is very underrated. And having that supporting cast with like three or four guys who can run routes, catch the ball, I think it will help. It will raise the flow of the offense, and overall, I'm pretty high on that Todd Monken Lamar Jackson combo.
Yeah, very fair. And the common theme here from all the teams we just put up is these are arguably the 5 best quarterbacks in the NFL right now. So obviously, quarterbacks make the biggest deal here, and it was massive for the Ravens that they were able to get Lamar back. Now, that does it for the they are close tier. Moving on to the playoff contender tier. I think the first team we're going to go with is a team I think a lot of people think could be in the they are close tier, but I think a big thing why you didn't put them in there is their quarterback situation. It's kind of not really up in the air, but I think we know who's going to start for them, but they're just not as elite right now as the other guys above them. So that team is the San Francisco 49ers. So Fabian, tell us a little bit more about the Niners and why you put them in the playoff contender tier instead of the they are close tier.
Yes, it's because of their quarterback situation in combination with their offensive line. I mean, when you look at that offensive line, outside of Trent Williams, there are. I'm just reading it now from ourlads.com. Left guard Aaron Banks, who was terrible last year. Center Jake Brendel. Right guard Spencer Burford. Maybe John Feliciano, who was on the Giants last year. And right tackle Colt McKivitz. Maybe it's Jalen Moore. I think he was a rookie last year. So this is arguably one of the worst offensive lines outside of left tackle. And if you pair that with either Brock Purdy or Sam Darnold, that's probably a downgrade in general. However, I mean, Kyle Shanahan, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, I think it won't matter who's going to play quarterback. He will probably look good. And if I had to bet money on who's going to be the week 1 starter, I would probably put my money on Sam Darnold because I think Darnold, for as much criticism as he has gotten over the past couple of years, I still think that Kyle Shanahan will be in love with his arm talent and athleticism. He will throw the occasional interception for sure. But I think when you think about all the bootleg action that Kyle Shanahan wants to play, that's basically the game that Sam Darnold will be able to execute. And for Kyle Shanahan, you just gotta hit the open receiver sometimes. So I would not be surprised if Sam Darnold is like a top 7, top 8 quarterback in EPA per play next season, which should easily be enough to be a playoff contender in the NFC. And they still have a very solid defense.
Yeah, and fair enough. Sam Darnold never really got a fair shake in the NFL, kind of always bounced around between poorer teams with not great offensive coordinators, not great offensive schemes. So, I mean, hey, as I said before, I'm a big USC fan. I'd love to see the former USC kid get like a big bounce back season with the Niners here. The next couple teams, I'm going to kind of put them in their own little bucket. And I think they're teams that we expect to be here and have been here before for previous years. And those three teams are the Dolphins, the Chargers, and the Cowboys. So why don't you just touch quickly on these three teams?
Yes, all three might have decent offenses, but all those offenses, I have a few question marks about the ceiling. We saw the ceiling with Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins last year when they played like better defenses, smarter defense coordinators. Then at some point they have reached a ceiling. I'm not entirely sold on the Chargers. I love Justin Herbert. But I'm still not that high on their offensive line. Keenan Allen is getting older. It's hard to project their rookie wide receiver. So I like that they got rid of Joe Lombardi, and Kellen Moore is probably going to be an upgrade, but I really wonder what the ceiling of the Chargers can be. I'm also not high on their defense. They could use some more secondary help. And the Cowboys, I mean, they will always go as far as Mike McCarthy goes, I would say. I like that they got rid of Zeke Elliott. I like Dak Prescott, but yeah, just a playoff contender for me, nothing more.
Yeah, fair enough. And I don't think that's controversial for either three of those teams at all. But I'm sure they'll be looking to break through and kind of prove us wrong and put themselves in that higher up tier. Now, the next team I want to touch on, it's a team you know very well. It's your favorite team, the New York Jets. They just acquired Aaron Rodgers after it felt like they were kind of supposed to get him throughout the offseason. And as it kind of went on, there were some questions whether they would be able to do it, and they finally did it, bringing along Randall Cobb and some other buddies from Green Bay. So tell us why you have the Jets in the playoff contender tier.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the Jets last year, great defense, a few playmakers on offense, injuries along the offensive line, and overall they did, I would say, pretty well for what they had to deal with. Like Zach Wilson was terrible. They lost their starting left tackle before the season. They had a few wide receiver injuries. They had the Elijah Moore drama, and now getting Aaron Rodgers. I mean, he's 39 years old. I do not expect him to play on the 2020-2021 MVP level, but Aaron Rodgers with guys like Garrett Wilson, Mecole Hardman for some gimmicky stuff. His buddies, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb. For as much as I find those moves hilarious, I still think there will be a few good connections between those guys. And their defense, again, defense is very hard to predict. It's very unstable. The defense needs to stay healthy to get close to the level that they were last year. But overall, I think it's very hard to not call the Jets a playoff contender in the AFC.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's completely fair that you've done so there. And then moving on from there, we got two more teams. Got four more teams surrounded this tiers, but I'm going to separate these two teams, I guess, in separate buckets. So the first two I'm going to put together is the Jaguars and the Lions, two teams that I think a lot of people didn't expect to be, like, at the beginning of last year, would not have expected in 2023 to see these guys kind of move up. But hey, they proved a lot of people wrong. They looked really good. Trevor Lawrence looks like a stud for them. And I think, hey, Dan Campbell might actually be a good coach. So just quickly touch on these teams before we get into the next two teams in this tier list.
Yeah, third year for Trevor Lawrence, basically his second year, because I do not count the first year under Urban Meyer. Second year with Doug Peterson. They got Calvin Ridley, a legit number one wide receiver. I just think that their offense will be good. I like Doug Peterson. I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I think they will take the next step. Their defense, I'm not very high on, but I think their offense might just be enough. And the same goes for the Lions. They will be without Jameson Williams for 6 weeks. I could understand the argument if someone says they could also drop one tier below to mediocre at best, but we also have to somehow consider the weak NFC. I think in a weak NFC with their offense, they should be able to be a playoff contender.
Yeah, fair enough. And before people yell at us in the comments, no, these tiers are not ranked by within their own tier. So they're kind of just the teams that are in a tier list, they're in a tier list. We're not like the furthest left isn't the best team, the furthest right isn't the worst team in the tier. So just forgot to preface that. Want to preface that now, but another team that's kind of similar to the Jaguars and the Lions, where they kind of were expected to do poorly last year and just didn't do as poorly and did pretty well. And on top of that, had a really good draft. The Seattle Seahawks. I mean, if you look at their draft and you see the guys that they got at the picks that they got, you'd be completely shocked. They got two guys who were projected to go in the top 10. They were able to get them at rather low ADP. I forget when exactly they picked them, but I mean, great draft for the Seahawks. I mean, just completely turned this franchise around with the Russell Wilson trade. A lot of people thought they'd be in the number one pick contention, but no, they're playoff contenders now. So tell us a little bit more about the Seahawks.
Yes, again, we have to consider the conference they are playing in, but the Seahawks are returning their basically their starting offensive line outside of center. Both left tackle and right tackle were rookies last year. They played very solid. Second year, I would expect some second year bump for both of those guys. The OC stays the same. The scheme stays the same. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and they now added like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is supposed to be the premier plug and play slot receiver and who should fit really well within that offense. Geno Smith is pretty decent for what the Seahawks are doing. And I just think that the Seahawks in the NFC are going to have a good offense. And on the defensive side, I expect them to be, just from a talent level, slightly better than last year, adding Devin Witherspoon, getting Jamal Adams back in that inside the box role where he is best blitzing the passer, stopping the run, and stuff like that. So yeah, in a weak NFC, I fully expect the Seahawks to be in playoff contention.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. And finally, to close out this this tier here, the playoff contenders, we got a team that kind of struggled halfway through last year in the Cleveland Browns. But mind you, they didn't have Deshaun Watson for over half of the year, and it was crazy. Some fans wanted to keep Brissett in when Watson came back, but you have them back in the playoff contender tier. So a full year with Watson, full training camp with Watson. Do you think the offense is just going to click better, or what do you see here?
Yes, exactly. This is completely subjective analysis now, but when you read some of their comments, coaching comments, pressers from last year, they had a very specific offense for Jacoby Brissett over the first 12 weeks, which they also had to install during training camp. And it was very hard for them to transition to an offense that Deshaun Watson likes best. Deshaun Watson had his best season in 2020 in Houston when they had a very high pass rate, where he was able to operate from the shotgun, had the field in front of him, and was just able to distribute the ball. And that was not the Browns' offense in 2022. So this year, and you can see it within all their offseason moves, they're adding the wide receivers. This is going to be a different offense from what we saw last year. Not as much heavy personnel. I'm expecting more of a pass-first approach. Lot more wide receivers on the field. Added Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, Amari Cooper. I really like how David Njoku has transitioned. So it's just that I'm expecting a different offense for the Browns, which should fit the skill set of Deshaun Watson much better. And also, like you said, Deshaun Watson has not played any meaningful NFL action for 1.5 years. Will have a full training camp in an offense that suits him better. And I think that will be a stable part that should carry the Browns to a much better record this year.
Yeah, fair enough. And that completely closes out the playoff contenders tier list. And moving on from there, we got the mediocre at best tier list. This tier list is kind of filled with teams that don't have the best talent and and if they don't, they have some pretty good coaches. And on the other 10, teams that have really good talent, but just don't have the best coaching. And one of those teams that has, or a couple of those teams that have not the best talent, but some amazing coaching, I'm going to put these all in a bucket. It's the Patriots, it's the Steelers, and it's the Broncos, right? I think those are three teams I think you can combine and kind of put them in the bucket where they don't have maybe the best skill position players, but they have some great coaches. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about those three? Maybe if I'm wrong for putting them in a bucket together.
I mean, when we talk about coaching, we might also add the Giants to it, who did a masterful job last year. Yeah, with the Patriots, it's very tough to get a good read on them. I think going from Matt Patricia as the OC to Bill O'Brien, I'm not the biggest Bill O'Brien fan, but that still has to be like a monumental upgrade in terms of offense. Mac Jones has to make another step forward. I'm not in love with their skill position players, so it might just be another year of the Patriots not being great on offense, needing their defense to create turnovers, and then they play in a super tough conference and a super tough AFC East, which will make things a lot harder. Steelers, I can argue that I could also put them into the bucket of playoff contenders, but we are having a very strong AFC, and some team has to fall back to the mediocre part. So Steelers, I can see the upside with Kenny Pickett in his second year. They got a decent skill position group, added Donald Washington in the draft, added some beef to the offensive line. And like you said, it's a very well-coached team, and Mike Tomlin seems to get the best out of them. That's like I would say, hidden advantage that's not always perfectly captured in betting lines, in my opinion. Broncos, to be honest, I don't have a great read of on them as of now. I just put them in that bucket. Russell Wilson did a step back. I think Sean Payton will be a major upgrade in terms of coaching, in-game decision making. But when it comes to the talent level of the offense and the defense, I'm really struggling to get anywhere close to them being playoff contenders.
Yeah,
and Giants, yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, and Giants, they got very fortunate last year. I think they will take a step back when it comes to variance, especially like end of game variance. Still think they are a very well coached team. They upgraded their offensive line. They upgraded their skill position group. Daniel Jones got the monumental contract extension. Don't know whether Saquon Barkley is going to play in week 1. Overall, like a perfectly mediocre team to me.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say about the Broncos, literally punting away, terrible decision making, punting away field position, all that stuff. So, gotta imagine that combined with, I'm sure this is I hope this is the absolute floor Russell Wilson will play at. They have to bounce back a little bit from last year. Now, moving on, you highlighted this one team in particular, and I think they're slightly different in this group in that they just unfortunately lack a good quarterback, but have a pretty good all around team and maybe not the best coaching, but I think above average or NFL average coaching, and that's the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, they lost Aaron Rodgers, but Aaron Rodgers, I mean, it's not like this is like the 2011, the early 2010s Aaron Rodgers we're talking about. Aaron Rodgers has kind of fallen off a little bit in recent years. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Green Bay Packers.
Yes, decent overall team, and Jordan Love is the deciding factor here. If you do like any career quarterback projection, like a Bayesian quarterback projection, you will see that the experience of Jordan Love will bump him a little bit more towards what the general consensus might be. I think I'm probably higher on Green Bay's coaching than some other people. I think as soon as Aaron Rodgers really fully committed to that offense of Matt LaFleur, it was a completely different offense. And I think there's a upside scenario in which John Love will be able to execute LaFleur's offense. He might not have a high ceiling, but I can see that offense working, and them as an overall decent team winning like 7-8 games or something. But there's also the scenario in which John Love is just not good. He's going to suck. Playmaker still too young, and they might not win more than 6 games. So yeah, tough to get a good read on them due to the John Love uncertainty. I think mediocre at best is probably a good tier for them.
Yeah, fair enough. Moving on to the next 3 teams, and another bucket that I've created here of teams that I think were would probably expect it to do a lot better last year, but either didn't do a lot better or got incredibly lucky with their results in the end. And those three teams are the Minnesota Vikings, where they fall in the latter half of that. The New Orleans Saints, who were rather disappointing for a lot of people, and the Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders. Tell us a little bit more about this bucket.
Yeah, Vikings got extremely lucky in terms of all the advanced efficiency metrics. The Vikings were just an average team, and going to the playoffs, they were not even a field goal favorite against the Giants at home, which probably told you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
They had John Addison, but I'm still extremely, let's quote unquote, low on Kirk Cousins. It's tough to project a good rookie season for John Addison. We just don't know about these rookies. Might help, might not be the biggest addition outside of Jefferson. There might just not be enough receiving talent, and their defense on paper really stinks. If you look at all the cornerback visits they had pre-draft, I think they took like 2 cornerbacks during the draft. It will be a super young secondary that is going to be a very aggressive Brian Flores defense, and that might turn into a few turnovers, but it might also turn into getting conceding like 35 points here and there. Vikings just a mediocre team for me. I'm really struggling to put them in the contenders bucket, and Saints and Raiders probably like the same team for me. Like above average quarterback, not the greatest supporting cast, and a very questionable defense. I think sums it up very well.
Yeah, fair enough. And 2 more teams to close out this tier. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Let's start with the Falcons, though, because they have a really good skill position guys. I mean, their offense is absolutely loaded, but the biggest question mark, again, as you see, is the theme of this this tier right here, is the quarterback in question. Do we believe in Desmond Ridder? So, Suma, just tell us a little bit more about the Falcons and why you put them in the mediocre tier.
Yeah, for the last 2 teams, I can make a case for a different tier. For the Falcons, I can make the case for the playoff contenders tier. It just depends on how high you are on Desmond Ridder. You mentioned it already. I think there's a wide range of outcomes. I like what I saw from Desmond Ridder last year. I think the crazy confidence that the Falcons have in him by not taking like a quarterback in the draft, or even trying to get Lamar Jackson, tells us that they are very high on Ridder. And I think if you think about them having a very good offensive line, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, there's a scenario in which Desmond Ridder, against an easy schedule, just needs to be like a solid average quarterback, which can get the most out of that offense. Basically, not fucking around and just trying to be that Ryan Tannehill-esque level quarterback. You will have his games with a few interceptions. You will make his mistakes, but I think, especially against bad defense, the Falcons will have a big advantage where he just has to execute the offense, and they can pound away with the ball in the second half. And I would not be surprised if the Falcons made the playoffs next year, just because they have a very solid foundation on offense, and they are playing against a very, very laughable schedule. And I think that their defense would also be slightly better.
Yeah, and like you said, Desmond Ridder, he doesn't have to be good. He just has to not be bad, right? There's a big difference. So just playing to that floor is all they really need, and let the skill positions do the work. They have absolute studs out there. So final team in this tier list, and I think you'd argue that they probably could be lower when you mentioned that point on them earlier, is the Panthers. So why don't you just give a quick touch on the Panthers quickly?
Yeah, that was basically a toss-up between mediocre at best and bad. What gave the edge to what mediocre at best is that I think the prior on Bryce Young is the highest among all quarterbacks. And he gets put in a situation with Frank Reich, who I'm extremely, extremely high on, behind a decent offensive line. And I think that the skill position group they could use a few upgrades, but I think they could be fine enough to the point where just Frank Reich and Bryce Young in that combination and scheming so many good throws open for him might be enough to make the Panthers like a little bit relevant next year. I also think that they have a few playmakers on defense. And yeah, it's basically the combination of Frank Reich and Bryce Young that makes me believe they might win like 1 or 2 games more than we believe right now.
Yeah, I think Frank Reich is also. I think he's a pretty good coach. I think he got dealt a bad hand with Indianapolis. Just didn't have the best quarterbacks. And that just about wraps up the mediocre at best tier. Moving on to the yuck, the bad, the ugly. And I think this is a surprise to some people that this team is still on the board here, and you have them slotted in this tier, and that's the Chicago Bears. I mean, Justin Fields is an amazing talent, right? He's was a fantastic quarterback last year. Not fantastic, I guess, but just a lot better than people were
as a runner.
As a runner, yes. As a runner, he's a big playmaking quarterback, but on the ground, but not in the air. But yeah, I guess tell me why I shouldn't be as shocked with why the Bears are in this bad tier.
They can prove me wrong. And once Justin Fields improves as a passer through like the first 5 weeks, I'm happily upgrading them. No issue there. But Justin Fields, for as great as he was as a runner, he has shown nothing as a passer in his second year in the NFL. And that was a major red flag to me. I'm willing to completely adjust from the prior and moving the Bears up in my ratings when the season kicks off. But right now, it's very hard for me to put a team with still a very bad defense on paper and a very, let's call it, inexperienced group of offense with a quarterback who has not shown anything as a passer into that mediocre at best tier. So yes, Justin Fields, show me you can improve as a passer. But last year, I mean, we were talking about all those highlight runs like every week, and they still had the number 1 overall pick. Like there was just nothing in the passing game, and until that changes, it's very hard for me to upgrade them.
And also at the same time, when you have teams blowing you out by almost double digits, it definitely opens up the field a lot more, and it's easier to run the ball as a quarterback because they're not really trying. They don't really care if you run the ball. They're worried about you throwing that deep ball. But yeah, definitely the team of this tier list, I think, of this tier that could move up is the Bears. But 3 more teams that you have in this tier. I think 2 of them are kind of stuck in limbo now, and that's in with the Washington Commanders. I almost said their other name, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 2 teams that are kind of in limbo, and then the other team that you have in this tier is the Colts, who just picked up Anthony Richardson, but he's a couple years away. So why don't you tell us about these 3 teams here?
Yes, Commanders. Very tough for me to be higher on Sam Howell. I mean, all of a sudden, the Commanders are saying that Sam Howell is their guy, and he wasn't even on the active roster until like week 15 or something last year when they had bad quarterback play. So if you are high on your rookie quarterback and you want him to be your week 1 starter next year, like why is he inactive on game days when you have bad quarterback play? So that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I think the Commanders have a decent set of playmakers like Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson had a very impressive rookie season. The offensive line is doing some shakeup right now. Don't think we can be pretty high on that. And their defense is like a mediocre at best unit. So I like Scott Turner there, OC. I think he was doing some creative stuff last year with Tyler Heineke. But overall, it's just not enough for me to take them out of the bad tier. Bucks, I'm super low on that coaching staff, like super, super low. Baker Mayfield, I just don't see it happening, to be honest. I mean, the Bucks were basically a mediocre team last year with Tom Brady, who was playing phenomenal at times, but their coaching is bad. Their in-game decision making by Todd Bowles is bad. Don't know how long you can carry that defense. And yeah, I'm not super stoked about Baker Mayfield leading that offense. And the Colts, the Colts are wild cards because we just don't know about Anthony Richardson. super
Yeah.
high upside, like really super high upside, but also a very, very low floor. There's a scenario in which he's having a super bad rookie season, basically like Justin Fields last year, where he has a lot of highlight runs, but he's flat out not good as a passer, and the Colts might be competing for the first overall pick. And there's a scenario in which Shane Steichen, who has done a tremendous job with Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts, is also able to do a great job with Anthony Richardson and is able to improve his passing efficiency in year one already. He might give them a high floor with Anthony Richardson as that 11th guy in the run game, which might provide a high floor. They already have a few established guys like Michael Pittman, Pierce in his second year. The rookie that they have drafted, Josh Downs, I expect him to be their slot guy from day one. So there are a few intriguing pieces in place, but it all goes with Anthony Richardson, and too much uncertainty right now to put them in any other tier.
Yeah, and Anthony Richardson as a prospect, I mean, you mentioned it on Forward Progress here before. He's just could be so completely volatile, right? He could be really, really good and potentially play his way into the elite tier at some point in his career, or he could be incredibly bad and not get there and be like the next team's backup quarterback right now, Malik Willis. So segueing into the Tennessee Titans, it's like they look pretty bleak, man. Like Tannehill, I guess, can maybe string something together to get them up into the mediocre at best here. But I mean, they're one injury away, I think, from being in the number one pick contention. So what do you think about the Tennessee Titans here?
Yes, so a friend of mine today said when I sent him the team tiers, he said, I quote, "I don't know how they are going to do it, but the Titans are somehow going to have a division lead in November." And I mean, fair enough. I mean, that could absolutely happen, but yes, there's also probably a hidden advantage in Mike Rabel's head coaching, but other than that, their offense, like outside of Trent Burks, there is nothing who really gives me like a good feeling about their passing offense. Their offensive line is bad. Ryan Tannehill is on the decline. They still think that they can run a run first offense with a bad run game. So I just don't like anything about their offense. And while their defense has a few interesting pieces, and I think that their coaching on defense is probably one of the best in the league, I still don't think, or I don't see how this can be enough to be anywhere in the mediocre tier. I mean, they might probably win a few games because they play in a bad AFC South against two rookie quarterbacks, 4 games against rookie quarterbacks. But just from a talent perspective, I'm just not seeing it.
Yeah, fair enough. For Vrabel is always able to work wonders with this Titans team. I don't know how he does. He doesn't always have the best decision making skills in game either. It's just I don't know if it's just motivation or what it really is. It's like really unquantifiable. But yeah, he's a good head coach for them. But I mean, we could realistically they could be leading the division, but we could also realistically seeing them in the next tier we have here, which is the number one pick contention. And I mean, the first team we're going to put in there, I think it's the most obvious one. I mean, it's the Cardinals. Cliff Kingsbury hated this team and just wanted to leave and go to Thailand after having to deal with them for 3 years. Kyler Murray's fresh off an ACL tear. I don't know if he's going to be ready for the start of the season, but I mean, it probably doesn't really matter because I think their goal, all three of these teams' goal is going to try and get Caleb Williams and kind of look towards the future here. So, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Cardinals?
Yes, I don't think Kyler Murray will play in week one. He will probably not play before October. And then it's also a question of how much he will be able to play. Like one of his biggest assets are his legs, and coming off an ACL in a season that doesn't matter, I'm not sure how much they will really be willing to let Kyler Murray run and do some of his funky stuff. So I can also see a scenario in which he is not ready until like mid or late October, and in a lost season they might say, okay, it doesn't matter, he's not going to play at all this year. I can definitely see that. But yeah, terrible defense on paper. Offense work in progress with Colt McCoy. Yes, they should really be in contention for the number Tank for Caleb. Hashtag tank for Caleb.
Exactly. All right. Next thing we got is the LA Rams, and I'm just going to stick the Houston Texans in there because it's obviously the last team, and that's where they're going. But yeah, just give us a little bit more about the Rams and the Houston Texans.
The Rams could have the worst defense in the league, and then on offense they have Matthew Stafford coming off, I think, elbow surgery behind a bad offensive line, with Cooper Kupp being 31 years old, and that's pretty much their offense. And on defense, they have Aaron Donald, and that's it. So they have drafted like, I don't know, 12 or 13 players in the draft. They have signed like 24 undrafted rookies. It will be a very young team in transition, and I'm not sure that the trio of McVay, Stafford, and Cooper Kupp will be enough to carry them to like 7 wins or something. I just think that the Rams, it will be a bad season for them. It's a rebuild. And yeah, my expectations for them are pretty low. And yet Texans, I think that especially Texans fans will disagree with that, but we just got to remember that we are talking about a team that was a 4th and 16 away from getting the first overall pick, that's playing with a rookie quarterback, with a very underwhelming receiving group of Noah Brown, Robert Woods, maybe John Mechie, Nico Collins, with a first-year defensive-minded head coach, with a first-year play caller at OC. We don't know what to expect. Usually rookie quarterbacks have a very hard time. The combination of a defensive-minded head coach and a rookie quarterback is really toxic for the first season, not for the long-term outlook. And yeah, I think DeMeco Ryans needs a lot more talent on defense to get anywhere close to that 49ers level of defense of the past couple of years. So yeah, I mean, the Texans, I didn't like what they did in the draft, trading up and giving up so many assets. I mean, just think about, they could have CJ Stroud and their great college wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba right now, basically doing the same pairing that the Bengals did with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. I just don't really get this. Yeah, now we are looking at a rookie quarterback with an underwhelming skill position group, with 1 or 2 question marks along the interior offensive line. And I just don't think the floor for that offense and for that defense is very high.
Yeah, absolute head scratcher for me as well with that Texans trade. I mean, you could just look at what the Bears did this year, right? Like, you do what you say there and draft in Jigba, not move that pick. And then, hey, if things don't work out, you could just trade out of first. And if you like your quarterback, that's fine. Trade out of the first, get a haul like the Bears did, and then build from there instead of just trying to go all in this year. Yeah, big head scratcher for me.
Just think about the possibility that the Texans might have the 1st or 2nd overall pick next year, and it will belong to the Cardinals, who might take Caleb Williams with one of their picks and trade the other pick for I think the guy's Drake May, and get an insane haul. Like, that would really like trade Kyler Murray for a decent haul, take Caleb Williams and trade the 2nd overall. I like that. Would be probably one of the biggest storylines in the NFL when it comes to rebuilding a team over the past decade.
I know, and they'll really be able to do it overnight. That'd be absolutely insane, and I'm sure the Cardinals fans are loving it. But I mean, that just about does it for us here on Forward Progress. We gave you what we think is the definitive 2023 NFL tier list. And listen, I know a lot of people are going to be disagreeing with this, and if you do, hey, there's a comment section down below. Feel free to tell us your thoughts on it, and while you're there, smash that like button and hit that subscribe button, because we are going to be bringing you a ton more NFL content over the coming weeks and all throughout the offseason, including division previews, conference previews, and a lot more fun stuff like this tier list we did right here. Anyways, for Fabian Sommer, I'm producer Jason, signing off here on Forward Progress. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you.